I was invited to give a talk to the slow food movement. And they asked me this question: is there a paradox, between humans and trees? I mean, we are so separated. And I looked at it, and this is what I would like to share with you in terms of what I have found. And I found this very interesting. We who work a lot in the environment or in social areas should really understand what it's all about. And I'll share with you a story of how this came about, what the paradox is, and how I think that all of us could resolve this paradox. So, with that, out in Machu Picchu in Peru, many years ago, year 2000, I came across this saying. It said, in Espanol, I translate to English, it said, O Sol, O Sun, help us, we who are the manifestations of your energy, to know our mothers, the plants. They intercede with you on our behalf. And they said this to the forest. And I thought, what on earth was all this about? Right? And the more I thought about it, the more clear it became that what it was referring to was the basic fact that all life operates on the capture of an electron excited by light. As a photon of light hits any atom, an electron is pushed up a shell, and as it falls, it releases energy, and life has learned how to catch this and then put it into this phenomenon that we call life. Now, the process that does it is termed photosynthesis. And because plants are the agents of this capture, they are so critically important to our well being and is reflected in that saying from Peru. See, the energy of the sun is captured by plants using photosynthesis. All of us learned this in high school. Many of us have forgotten. But the reality is that this is the motor of life. All the energy that powers the life within us was originally won by a plant somewhere. Everything that's within us was made solid, was made possible to be solid by a plant somewhere, sometime, through a process called primary productivity. And it is that process that I'm going to talk about today. And I think it's very important for all of us to understand. Anyway, trees are symbols of this relationship. They are the highest order of beings in the kingdom, the plant kingdom, that provides for the well being of ours. And as you see from the diagram, from the plants to the animals to the big animals, and so on and so forth. See, primary productivity occurs in the photosynthetic biomass of the leaves of plants that constitute all terrestrial ecosystems. Now, if you look at the leaves of plants on this land, it is phenomenal because the area of land on this planet is roughly 148 million square kilometers. And if you consider the area of leaves that exist on this land, it is 4 times the area of land. This is the incredible surface area that is presented to the sun to collect the solar energy to produce the well-being for us. See, now we look at trees. What do they do? Let's look at it in a fundamental sense. It gives us shade so that the environment below is a little cooler. So the environment is more constant, right? And through day and night, there's constancy with the shade. It gives us the provision of creating not only shade above, but roots. And the roots of the plants collect the solar energy, take it down, and creates this living soil. There is no time for me to talk about that in this presentation, but I would like people to consider that in 15 centimeters of a hectare of living soil, there is roughly about 15 tons of living matter, mostly microorganisms, equivalent to about 20 horses. And that energy is what drives and what has been driving. Fortunately, there's not too much time to go into that, but I encourage all of you to follow. And when sufficient trees come together with the shade, a forest emerges. And under the forest, we have what is called an organism created environment. And that changes the environment in any place, anywhere on the planet, from extremely dry, inhospitable environment to a cool, wet environment. But all this is made possible now through the leaves of the trees. But the leaves of most trees, if you look at this, right, constitutes only 1 to 5% of its total biomass. Most of the biomass of leaves of trees and plants are in the roots, the stem, the twigs and branches, and very little in the leaves. But it is just 1 to 5% of global terrestrial biomass, the leaves. They provide the following ecosystem services. They give us oxygen. They create carbohydrates and sugars. They clean groundwater and cycle atmospheric water. They give us ambient cooling. They give us cloud condensation nuclei. I won't talk about all of this, but I will point a couple of things in my thesis as I go on. Now, if we want to restore the functions of a forest, always we should be looking for a high B to B ratio. A high B to B means a high biodiversity to biomass ratio should be the response. Because the opposite, what we've had up to now from forest departments, etc., is just monocultures. And in a monoculture, you'll have high biomass, but you will not have the high biodiversity. And this balance is critical. So attending to this, we built what Tanya spoke about, analog forestry. And I encourage people to go to the webpage and follow analog forestry if you're interested in that kind of process. Now, what has happened up to now and what we have ignored in terms of the trees and plants is as we are cutting down the forest and taking it away, we're also burning the oxygen, they're consuming the oxygen, and all the plant life, of course, that creates this is going down. And if you look at the studies, the records that have been done from 1989 onwards, you see that there's a steady fall in the oxygen concentration in the atmosphere, while there's a steady rise in the carbon dioxide. Now, this is concerning and should be concerning to all of us. Unfortunately, it's not getting the attention it deserves. Now, look at this. This tells us what's going on. You see the green light here, the green line. This is the oxygen that's been produced by the land and the oceans. And down here below that is the loss. Here we go. And what is eating into it? The burning of fossil fuel. The burning of fossil fuel just eats up oxygen, right? Fires, and we breathe oxygen, as does livestock. We've mapped it out. And in terms of fossil fuel and human respiration, we can see the countries and the areas where the populations are and the areas we are driving towards fossil fuel-led development. Oxygen is being sucked down. And if you look at this graph, we can see what's happening. It's becoming rapid now. So it's something that we have to address, I do believe. And the only thing that can put oxygen back are living plants through the photosynthetic biomass component. Nothing else on this planet can create oxygen except photosynthetic biomass. And we have not given it a penny of value. Now, consider that the current surface area, as I said, is about 4 times or thereabouts of the land surface area are the leaves. We need desperately to increase this, maintain this, and increase this if we are really going to be meaningful about creating a sustainable future. But there is something else that's coming up. We've created so many problems for ourselves, and that is this. See, what's happening is, in many nations today, temperatures will exceed 37 degrees. I mean, in India, in Pakistan, it's going over 40. The problem is that for chlorophyll, chlorophyll is an enzyme, and the optimum temperature of operation for chlorophyll is 37 degrees. As the temperature gets higher and higher, chlorophyll can produce less and less and less and less, ultimately denatures, and it can't produce anything. This means food production, as the heat goes up, food production gets slower and slower and slower, and ultimately the plants themselves collapse. This is a future that's coming. And this is a future we have to face and adapt to. How can we do this? One of the things that we should look at again, back to the leaves of trees. The leaves of trees have an evaporative cooling effect on the ambient environment. The USDA estimates that one large tree produces roughly 1,200,000 British thermal units of cooling, which means, 750, an acre is about 540 million British thermal units a day of cooling. Now, when we design the landscapes that we have to design on the future, we have to take such features into consideration. Otherwise, we are going to be lost. Now, what we have to do is we have to recognize the ecosystem value, the services produced by a leaf. In this picture, under the current economy, we can pluck the breadfruit and it has value in the marketplace, but only after it is plucked and sent to market. Under the proposed economy that we are proposing, we are saying, look, the leaves, the photosynthetic biomass has so much value, but they can only have that value as long as they're attached to the tree, as long as they're working. So if there's a way that we can keep the leaves on the tree and keep it working and give it a value, then not only can we produce more and more of ecosystem services, but we can think about creating a new economy, which for the first time can begin to put a value on life. Now, this happened in 2015 at the COP in Paris. Sri Lanka issued a position paper, and in it they said that we know that the production of oxygen and clean water cycling are carried out by the photosynthesis of trees. These primary ecosystem services are being depleting at an exponential rate globally because they're not being valued or recognized. This was in 2015. And up till about 2 years ago, nothing happened. So a group of people, scientists and other people, we have got together, and a company called Earth Restoration has been formed in Sri Lanka, responding to this. And in that company, I encourage people who are interested, please go to the webpage, check the webpage out, restore.earth, right? And here we are trying to now put value on the photosynthetic biomass and reflect that value back to the rural economy. We believe that this is one of the few ways in which we can begin to address the current impact on the ecosystem services that I spoke about. What I told you now were the companies and the activities that are going on. But let me come back now to where we started. The paradox, how humans and trees. This paradox can be resolved by recognizing our relationship to the trees. We spoke a whole lot about it. And in terms of trees and forests, we in this part of the world have known so much about it and ignored so much about it. The Buddha says, a forest is an organism of great benevolence and kindness, giving freely of its life processes, asking nothing in return. It even offers shade to the axeman who would cut it. What the Buddha says at that time, the forest is an organism, is a thing in and of itself. Today we call it an ecosystem. Giving freely of its life processes, these are the ecosystem services that I have been talking about. The production of oxygen, production of clean water, the production of dynamic carbon. So understanding that and understanding the prayer that came from the Andes, from Machu Picchu, hopefully we can understand a little more actually who and what we are. Let me resolve the paradox. For all of us who watch this, just say, I am alive to yourself. Take a deep breath. Say, I breathe. And understand that the possibility of you breathing, that truth was that the air you breathe was made breathable by a plant somewhere, sometime in the past. And the way that you individually, this is the truth, incorporate this truth into the way you individually live will determine the course of this world. Good luck to all of you.
I would like you to just cite some kind of examples or something that you have done through your work, which has had a lasting impact on you in any country, in any place that you have passed on this knowledge and have helped them restore the forests.
You know, Thomas Jefferson says, the greatest thing a man can do for his nation is to introduce to his culture a new plant of worth to his culture. All right? And I have sort of been going crazy with this thing because as an ecologist, as a conservationist, I know that exotic species create great problems in native ecosystems. But here we are, Thomas Jefferson is saying, the most important thing you can do for your nation is to bring an exotic species that is useful to your culture. All right? Now I have to resolve this. Right? And then when I looked around, I find that, for instance, in Sri Lanka, in the village, 70% of the trees that are there are exotic. Then you realize that there's no such thing as a bad tree or unuseful tree. It is only in the way we use it. That was the realization. And that is how the need to understand the forest came about. Because all of a sudden, you see, wait a minute, I can't be just planting trees, this is not. Then you ask the next question. Then you ask about the nitrogen in the soil. And then say, if you put nitrogen in the soil, then what starts happening? Then you start thinking about the large organisms that have to move in to start using this and breaking this down. And are you going to create predators all along the chain? So experimenting, doing this, making landscapes. At one time in my life, I've been a diver, I've been a scuba diver, I've been a fish collector, I've been a snake collector, I've had snake. Oh well, life has given me so much. So this eventually is what I'm trying to do to ensure there's more space for all that wonderful biodiversity that we cannot leave behind in this crazy rush for modernity and development.
Good evening, Dr. Senan Naik. It's wonderful. You have put in simple words a very complicated set of parameters. But tell me, which is the plant or tree which would have the maximum or highest biomass? But if that could be sort of planted around the world, would it make a difference? Though you will say there's no biodiversity, it would be unitary.
That's right. See, the thing is, only one thing will not do it. The biomass itself will not. That is what got us into trouble in the first place. Because before, at the times of the ancient kings, forests were planted differently. Forestry, looking only at biomass, was a recent invention. It happened with G.S. Hartig in Germany, right, when the German forests had to be regrown. And that then was taken as a model of forestry, and biomass itself became the goal. We've got to change that now. We've got to say, no, we need both biomass and biodiversity. Then we say, in native forests, we want only native species. In human areas, we want a mix of both because we too have to live.
We are planting many trees, but where we have not seen the changes. No changes we have seen in last couple of years. So what can be done? And like climate change, there is a problem, we all know, but there is the government are doing nothing in the name of climate change. So how and we are assuming that we will win the climate change. So how we will win by doing nothing?
Okay, it's like this. You have two parts to what you asked. One is the trees. When you plant trees, the Buddha doesn't say plant trees. He says ruk ropane, which means looking after the tree. Planting the tree is not the important thing. Looking after that plant until it becomes a tree is the most important thing. If you haven't done that, you're not successful. So that is very, very important. The second part is this. All of us are chasing development. And what is development? Development is moving into a technological world that demands the burning of fossil energy. That will only destroy us further. So without understanding what is creating the destruction, because we are all a part of it, right? It's very difficult. Once you understand what it is, then you yourself voluntarily can say, me as an individual, I take responsibility for what I do, and you slow down. If people can understand and do that, yes, we might have a chance with the future.
Since you definitely would be looking at, all of the kind of strategies that are being used for conserving forests and the biodiversity. What exactly are your thoughts on the Indian strategies towards this, the government or the people or, whatever organizations are working here? What would have been your study and analysis on that?
Okay, I'm not sure, but knowing that the tradition of forestry was to keep out the people and grow the trees. That was the tradition, because that was a British tradition. It came from Dehradun, from the School of Forestry, etc., etc., etc. Okay, fine. But if you look in Sri Lanka, for instance, and Kerala, same thing, right? In these climates, people responded to their climate by creating something that's like a forest, called a forest garden. And these things will give you coffee, will give you jack, will give you spices, will give you pepper, will give you income. Now, these forests are productive and they have been for a long time. And our people have knowledge on how to look after these things. The thing is, they are also struggling for existence because the current market will not help them survive, because the market is traditional, it's rapacious, right? Okay. But if we recognized primary ecosystem services like we're doing with earth restoration, and if we can pay them for their production, which is they're already doing anyway, right? But it needs to be contracted, and this is what we are building up now. Then you change the rural economies and you make these people more comfortable in where they live, and they have a little more extra with which they can start developing their lives.
So there's one question I have to ask. That is, have you worked on any large-scale project, maybe city scale or maybe neighborhood scale, which puts in all these things? I mean,
Yeah, I have. And all over the world also. If you go to our webpage, we work in 20 countries around the world. In Peru, we have some big things. So also in Ecuador, in Costa Rica también, yeah. Cuba. The Cuban government has taken a lot of this, especially in the east side of the Guantanamo and in Santiago de Cuba. Yeah. If you go to the webpage, you'll find the areas.
Could quote some example which you could quote?
Yeah, Cuba, Guantanamo, right? The state of Guantanamo. If you go to Guantanamo and you go into the city of Guantanamo and go out, all the farmers there, all that area is, using analog forestry was restored. Of course, in Sri Lanka and all over, yeah, sure. But in Bandarabella, if you go to our other webpage, Belipola Arboretum, that's the first analog forestry in the world. You can go to that webpage and you can also see all the stuff that's going on there. We're training people there from around the world.
I have a small question as to how do we balance, like we think urbanization or industrialization is the mode for development, and to industrialize
What's the question?
we literally take over lots of land, agricultural land,
Okay.
and then that puts pressure, like agricultural land is gone over either to real estate for housing or for industrialization, and then this agriculture moves into forests like we see in Kerala today. Kerala earlier used to have lots of agricultural land. Now the agricultural land is shifting. Literally, they bring their food from other states. They don't make their own food in Kerala these days. They get their food from Karnataka or some other places because their agriculture has shrunk. It has gone to more real estate business. And they have moved on to that, encroached on their forest areas. And the tribals are getting marginalized because of that. They are getting pushed out. And then even in the forest, we are trying to explore minerals. So how do we balance this out? Because this is a very important concern area. Once we balance this out, the rest of the things will fall in place. Any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. The thing is, what you've got there is a local political and economic situation. That is what it is. So socially, you have to accept a certain trend or not, right? That's bottom line. But then beyond that, if you want to help your rural people, I do believe that moving into a direction which increases the biomass and having a way to pay them for that would certainly be an attractive way for them. But as I said, the problem is contextual, what you said. And that you have to deal with that with whoever those people are in your area as a contextual problem and set the policy so that you protect certain areas, because the policy is such that, hey, you tell the politicians, no, we can make so much money, you don't have to put a factory here, we can make just as much or more and demonstrate that. Now that's what good education is, what knowing your area is, and if you can do that, you might have a chance.
There are several questions I have. So before I ask several questions, I want to ask the host whether I should choose one or I can ask more.
Well, let's start with one.
Okay. So the thing is that you said the trees contribute a lot of oxygen, but don't you think the maximum photosynthesis, maximum amount of photosynthesis actually occurs in the ocean rather than on
Yeah, sure.
land, which is anyway, just 1/4?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In terms of photosynthesis, the algae give us 70% of the production. But if you consider the trees, the algae don't do something else. They don't recirculate water, which does when you go through a leaf. Because the moment you do photosynthesis on land, for every molecule of carbon fixed, 100 molecules of water are used through the process. This is released, and this is what creates the huge clouds, and this is the only way that groundwater is cleaned, because otherwise groundwater cannot be cleaned. So therefore, without looking at it purely from only photosynthetic biomass, we look at photosynthetic biomass in the context of a leaf on land, as opposed to photosynthetic biomass free floating in the ocean without any respiring problems.
Okay.
That's the difference.
So
Yeah.
the other thing is, in one of your graphs, you had shown that we are consuming oxygen because of the rate at which we are burning fossil fuels. So assuming that even if this analog forestry becomes universally applied all over the world from tomorrow, do you think the photosynthetic rates can actually match the rates at which we are putting out carbon dioxide?
No. But the thing is, if we don't, we'll be choking in the cities. You can start with New Delhi, you can start with Mexico City, and as the industry goes up, Boyle's law of partial pressure, right? The oxygen concentration goes down, the people suffer, they have permanent damage, and this is the future we are moving into. So the more we can mitigate it, the better it is going to be for all of us.
So I understand that, there is no putting the clock back. We can only try to mitigate. That's what you are trying to tell us.
Absolutely, man. We are so far down the tube now. It's horrendous, but at least we got to try and do something right now.
And finally, I would appreciate if you actually cited the two sources of your two quotations, one from Peru and one from the Buddha. If you can give the exact sutra and the exact source of the inscription or whatever.
Yeah.
That'll be very
Come
nice.
to our webpage, you can get that. Yeah, sure. No worries. Come to the webpage.
See, you told now that the practical solution will be just aware the people. Okay. So the more we aware, the more we will get the results. But the problem is when we aware the people that grow more plants, they don't care that what they are growing. Now, like see, this is soil for something else. They will grow something else like grapes and on and on. They will grow whatever they want. They don't know that what there is a need. What types of need are there? And secondly, we were telling like we have seen last few years that many of children are going like Greta Thunberg and all. So they don't have any practical knowledge. Means they don't have seen any growing because they are just 16, 17. And they are telling that we will change, but they have not done anything. And the government rely on them that yes, okay, come, we will have a talk to just. So what do you think about them? What they will?
What to do? That is the future. Unless you educate them, unless all of them, like I said before, until you internalize, until you put into your own self what you want to be. That's what Gandhiji said. Be what you want the others to be. Never mind about what they do. Forget that. Into your mind, you get the truth and you act. That is enough. If you want to take another step, okay. But don't expect the other man to do that and say, he must do. No.
What would you like to pass on to the young generation and to the people who want to do something to save the earth? And also your thoughts on the development and nature, development versus nature, this whole debate.
I am a Buddhist. Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy. But I think and I accept the Buddha to be the best teacher. And the Buddha says, Krodaya, desire will bring pain, always. Development today is the creation of desire. Everything from advertising, from a better hairstyle to a better whatever. It is, the base of it is the creation of desire. And we are all, you, me, we are all participating in it. Right? We all. And we all suffer as a consequence. Right? Understanding this, the more we participate, the more we will. As like told the gentleman before, it is individual. We have to begin with ourselves. If you can step back one step, okay, good.